Hey everybody, it's Yvette from Yvette Marie's Fine Arts and Crafts, and today I'm going to be showing you how to use this Red Heart Boutique Sassy fabric to create this knitted ruffle scarf. And it's similar in the way you work it, basically the same pretty much as the ruffle scarf that is the Sassy Red Heart Boutique Sassy lace. They both come out beautifully. I'm creating a separate video for the fabric just because I have a couple different tips and tricks and pieces of information that are a little bit different from the lace. So today I'm going to be showing you, hopefully you can see it easily enough on this white background where you have the holes and everything. So today I'm going to be using the fabric. I'm going to be using a pair of wooden knitting needles in a size 10 for the laces and the fabrics and the sachet type yarns, the ruffle yarns. I always prefer to use a wooden knitting needle because of the fact that it's not super slippery to work with. I find that metal knitting needles for this project can be disadvantageous because if you have to walk away from your project and you put it down and it gets bumped, they slide off way easier. Not that they won't slide off the wood, but they slide off a lot easier from the metal. So if you do have to get up at any point, I do highly recommend that if you have any of these little boots or something similar, or even just a rubber band to place at the end of your knitting needle when you walk away before you finish your project, highly recommended. You'll also need a pair of scissors and a needle and thread, corresponding thread with the color of your fabric or your fabric that you're working with, and that is basically only going to be for the end of the project. Beginners, intermediate, and advanced can use this video. Hopefully beginners will be able to pick it up easily and it won't be too boring for advanced knitters. So I'm just going to show you how to cast on, how to knit, and then how to cast off. And I'll give you a couple tips and tricks along the way on how to combine two pieces if you're wanting to add to your length of your scarf, and some other things that I noticed when I was actually working with this fabric. In order to make a full scarf with one skein, my preference is to do 6 stitches for this particular scarf because it comes out nice and fluffy. I think the pattern may call for 4 stitches, and that'll give you a longer scarf. Mine, I used the 6 stitches and it came out to, I think it was about 45 inches long. So if you're wanting to add extra fabric to that to make it longer, I'll show you how to do so in just a few minutes. I'm going to work pretty quickly through this project. So if you are a beginner, you might want to just rewind it a couple times until you catch on. This project, once you get working on it, or if you're a seasoned knitter, it should take you about an hour to work up maybe. It's really not a very long project at all. It's very quick, so it's great for last minute gift ideas and things like that. So let's get started. When you're working with this yarn, I highly recommend that you have your hands free of dry spots that the fabric can catch on, and free of like little broken fingernails and things like that, because this is basically a chiffon that you're working with, and it tends to fray and pull really easily. Even just working with it, I noticed that I was getting little areas here where the threads were pulling. I'm not sure if you can see that, but the threads were pulling out in these smaller areas really easily, so it makes it a little bit weaker. So you want to just work your project and hopefully not have to take it apart to work it again, because it can get, not that it's going to fall apart by any means, but it just weakens it. And you'll see down here at the bottom, I'm not sure if you can see that, already one of the strings is pulled out from the fabric, and so that's kind of like what I've been finding with this fabric. It's easily frays. So when you first begin your project, like this area here, you may even want to use a little bit of fray check on the end or something similar when you start. So I'm going to start by folding over my fabric, overlapping 2 of my holes. And the reason I do 2 is because I like to have this area here, that's the frayed area or the raw edge, in the middle of my project, or the middle of the beginning of the row. And I'm going to cast on 6 stitches, and in doing so I'm going to just take my needle and go in from the back to the front in that first hole. And again, these 2 are the double layers, as you can see. I'm going to wrap my needle around the back, go in from the back again, and then the same thing for the next 4, so that I have a total of 6 stitches on my needles. Now this project would probably even be easy for a person who's never knitted before, because you're not actually using a regular yarn in which you're having to create holes and be consistent about the size of your knitting stitches and so forth. So this is really a great project for beginners. You're going to want to make sure that you keep your fabric straight and not all twisted as you're working it, because you want to keep this fabric straight as you're working it so you have nice ruffles. So you're just going to begin by placing your needle, free needle, from the front to the back in that first hole. Then you're going to find your next hole in your fabric. You're going to take it from the back, placing it over that hind needle, and then just catching it, pulling it through, and lifting off. And I'll do that for the rest of the row, and I'll explain it as I go along for the beginners. So you're going to go into that next hole from the front to the back, find your next hole in your working fabric, place it over the back of the needle from the back to the front, catching it on your needle, pulling it through the center, and lifting off. Okay, same thing again. And you're just going to repeat this for the rest of the entire row. Now the last 2 stitches, I've got my double layer here from where I folded it over at the beginning, so just make sure you're catching both layers of fabric as you go in that hole from front to back. Taking your next hole, placing it over the back needle, pulling it through, and lifting off. Same thing with that last one. Placing it over the back, pulling it through, and lifting off. So now we can turn that around, and you see you have your 6 stitches here. Now right now it's going to be a little bit easy to pull this open and stretch it out. In a few rows you'll notice that it kind of starts staying together like this here, where you'll actually see those ruffles really nicely. We'll just work on to the next row, making sure that you're not picking up this hole here, whoops, this hole here, but instead you're working through this hole here that's actually on the needle. Okay, so from front to back, picking up your next hole or loop, placing it over the back needle, catching it, pulling it through, lifting it off that back needle. And I'll just keep working. And if you want to just follow along if you're able to, I'll try to work a little bit slowly for the newbies. Seasoned knitters will probably be really able to work this really quickly already. One thing I want to mention too, and the differences between the fabric and the lace that I showed you earlier, is the Sassy lace, for at least from what I found, is really itchy. So if you happen to have very sensitive skin, this might be a better option for you, because it's the nice soft chiffon-like fabric, and it doesn't have any itching, so to speak, of that I've noticed. It's really soft and nice against your skin. You almost can't feel it when you're wearing it. It's so thin. So we just flipped it around again, and we're just going to work down that row again. I'll just work one more row, and then I will show you how to cast off. Actually, I'm going to show you how to attach another fabric here first, and then I'll show you how to cast off. So just making sure you're picking up just the loop on the needle, front to back. Looping it over the back needle and pulling through, front to back, front to back, looping it over, coming through. Again, I hope the black and white isn't too harsh against the white background. I tried to find one that wasn't going to be too disturbing on the eyes, yet that you could actually see as well. So you'll see how we're getting some nice ruffles here. And you'll also notice, if I can find it, here it is, that you don't even see that beginning area underneath where it's the raw edge. It's not noticeable at this point. It's completely hidden, which it will be when you wear it. It'll be completely hidden like this. And you'll notice this is kind of staying together now. It's not as easy to pull apart. You can still pull it, but it doesn't want to go. It wants to kind of stay more together like this here. So just quickly, I'm going to tell you how to add another piece of fabric if you're wanting to make your scarf a little longer. Very, very simple. When you get to the end of your skein, all you need to do is take another piece of fabric and overlap it. I usually just overlap it by 2 holes. That way it's not too thick and it's not noticeable either. Now again, you may want to put a little bit of fray check on each of the ends of that brand new fabric. And basically all you're going to do is you're just going to keep working through every single hole, and you're just going to work this area as if it was one layer, and you're just going to keep working through it using them to knit. Now if you find it easier, before you knit those 2 stitches, you might want to take just a little pin and place it there. That way as you work up to this area here and you work these 2 stitches together over the back needle, place them over the back needle, and then you can remove that pin so that you don't forget about it or poke yourself, and then you just keep working on the rest of your yarn, or excuse me, your rest of your fabric, creating your scarf. So I'm going to pause for just a moment, and I will come back in just a moment and show you how to finish your scarf. See you back in a moment. Casting off this project is really, really simple, and I'm going to show you an easy technique that I use to cast off when I'm working with regular knit and with these ruffle scarves. So the first stitch I'm going to show you how to do it the normal way with 2 knitting needles. And this is just a basic cast off like you would with regular yarn or anything that you're making, like a hat or anything like that. You can also use the same cast off method for this one here. Now I've got 6 stitches that I'm working, and at the end of my piece of fabric I want to make sure I've got 6 holes plus an additional 2, and the additional 2 are so that I can fold over those last 2 stitches similar to what I did at the beginning, lining them up and using them folded over doubled like that. And so I'm just going to place a little pin here in my fabric to hold it for now, and that leaves me a total of 6 holes to work into for my cast off. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 to match up with my 6 stitches here. So we're just going to use a basic cast off again like you would with a regular yarn, and we're just going to knit the first 2 in the same fashion that we did for the rest of the scarf. We're just going to knit the 2 at the beginning first. Now in a regular cast off you would use 2 knitting needles and do this the same way I'm doing it now. And what you do is you're going to take your the loop that's the farthest from the end, you're going to pull it over the first loop and up and over the end of the needle. So making sure that this first loop stays on the needle very carefully. You're just going to carefully lift the farthest one up and over, catching that first one and leaving it on the knitting needle. That is a standard cast off in the way that you reduce your stitches down to 1 stitch in the end, casting off. I'm going to show you something just a little bit easier that I do. Instead of using a knitting needle for the cast off on the right hand side, I actually switch over to a crochet hook. So I'm going to carefully switch over to a crochet hook. And I'm going to use my crochet hook as if it were my knitting needle in my right hand. So I'm just going to use it in the same fashion I would as a knitting needle. I'm going to knit my next stitch, pretending the crochet hook is a knitting needle. And it's much easier because it grabs a whole of these little loops. So now all I have to do is pull the loop through like so, and it's less danger of that first one falling off the end of the knitting needle like it easily like it could. Okay, so I'm just going to work it the same way, knitting one more. Now I have 2 on my hook, and I'm just going to pull the first one through the second one, and you'll see we're reducing the number of stitches we have now. So we've got 3 left, so I'm going to do that again. Now I've gotten to the point where I've got my little folded piece of fabric at the end here, and I've only got 2 stitches left. So I've got my little pin here. I'm just going to place this carefully using both layers over the back. I'm going to pull my needle out for now, just so I don't forget it or pin myself. And I'm going to finish that knit stitch, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull that one through the other one. We've got 1 more to knit, and we've got the end of our fabric here with 1 hole left, or 1 loop. And now I've got my last 2 stitches on my hook, and I don't need my knitting needles any longer. I'm just going to pull that last one through the loop. Now what I do is I continue pulling gently on the fabric through that last hole. Actually, it's a second to last, but we've got the last one still on here. And I'm going to pull it through just so that I have this little double layer of fabric like this. And this is why I wanted to make sure I had 2 loops left at the end on here, because I was able to work that last loop in. So here I don't have a fraying edge to work with. Okay, so you're going to see now that you just have the end of your scarf, and you'll see all the stitches in a little row here at the end. All you need to do is take your needle and thread. You're going to fold this little area over to the back. So this is your piece of fabric here at the end, and you're just going to place a couple stitches here, stitching it down to a couple layers of the lace or the fabric here, and then it just stays there, and that way you don't see it when you wear your scarf. Even if you flip it over this direction, you're not going to notice it when you're wearing it. It just, all those little ruffles just kind of fold in nicely. So one advantage of these ruffle scarves is beginning and ending them is fantastic, where you don't actually see the beginning or the end in most cases. So I think that's a pretty easy way to finish this project. Again, it's about an hour-long project, or a little less for some people, or a little more for others, and it's a great way to, great gift to give to people for any occasion. I hope that you enjoyed this project. It was really fun to make. It's one of my absolute favorite scarves to make. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. I will be happy to answer any questions if I have an answer for you. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.